Have you ever wondered how the American public school system came into existence? Let's delve into the roots of this integral institution. The American public school system was established in the 19th century, a period of profound growth and change in the United States. The goal wasn't just to educate, but to standardize and control the population. Quite a bold endeavor, wouldn't you say? A key player in this grand project was Horace Mann, the first Massachusetts Secretary of Education. Mann looked across the Atlantic for inspiration and found it in the Prussian education system. The Prussians, not exactly known for their love of individuality, had an education system that aimed to subdue and control populations. Their curriculum focused on obedience and conformity, instilling in students a strict adherence to Protestant values and industrial work ethics. While Prussians like Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben positively impacted American history during the Revolutionary War, their influence on the American education system wasn't optimal. To uncover more about this topic, I invite you to watch my video, The Hidden German Footprints in American History, that will change your view of history forever. It's not hard to see why this model appealed to Mann and his contemporaries. This system, heavily influenced by the Prussian model, was more about molding minds than enlightening them. It was about creating a population that could fit neatly into the burgeoning industries of the time, rather than fostering intellectual growth or artistic expression. Native American and minority children were not spared from this process. In fact, they were forcibly separated from their families and tribes and sent to Indian schools. The aim? To assimilate them into mainstream society, erasing their cultures and traditions in the process. This system was not designed to raise intellectuals or artists, but to instill obedience, conformity, and Protestant values. A system for the many, shaped by the few. Quite the origin story, don't you think? But who were the key players shaping this system? You might be surprised to know that some of the most prominent figures in American industry had a significant hand in molding our education system. Men like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. Yes, you heard that right. The same Carnegie who built an empire on steel, and Rockefeller, the oil magnate, were instrumental in shaping the education system we know today. Now you might be wondering, why would industrialists take such an interest in education? The answer lies in their economic needs. The Industrial Revolution was at its peak during their time, and factories were popping up like mushrooms after a rain shower. These factories needed a steady supply of workers, people who could follow directions, operate machinery, and maintain a strict work schedule. In other words, the industrialists needed an education system that could churn out obedient, conforming workers. And so, they set about molding the education system to meet these needs. The curriculum was designed to instill values of obedience and conformity, prioritizing the production of workers for factories and managers for industrial operations. Subjects that encouraged critical thinking, artistic expression, or intellectual pursuit were relegated to the sidelines. The focus was on creating a workforce that could fuel the industrial engine of America. But the industrialists didn't stop at influencing the curriculum. John D. Rockefeller went a step further and created the General Education Board. This board had a clear aim: to shape individuals into docile, compliant figures. It was not about raising intellectuals or artists, but about instilling values of obedience, conformity, and above all, loyalty to the system. So, let's take a moment to digest this. Our education system, which we often consider a beacon of enlightenment and progress, was essentially designed to serve the economic interests of the industrialists. It was not about fostering intellectual growth or nurturing individual talent, but about creating a compliant workforce that would keep the wheels of industry turning. The education system was designed to mold people into docile, compliant individuals, prioritizing the production of workers and managers over intellectuals. Quite a thought to ponder, isn't it? How did this education system affect minority communities? This is a question that leads us into the darker side of the American public education's history. Imagine being a child, torn away from your family, your community, your culture. This was the reality for many Native American and minority children in the 19th and early 20th centuries. These children were forcibly separated from their families and tribes and placed into what were known as Indian schools. The goal? To assimilate them into mainstream society. But what did this assimilation involve? It wasn't just about teaching these children to read and write in English. It was about eradicating their native languages, suppressing their cultural practices, and molding them into what was considered the American way of life. The curriculum focused on obedience and conformity, with the underlying aim of instilling Protestant industrial values. Many of these children were subjected to harsh discipline if they dared to speak their native languages or practice their cultural traditions. They were made to adopt new names, new clothes, and new ways of life that were alien to them. The psychological and emotional scars left by this forced assimilation are still felt in these communities today. The impact on these minority communities was profound. The loss of language, culture, and identity had far-reaching effects. It created a disconnect between generations, with parents and grandparents unable to pass on their cultural heritage to their children and grandchildren. Moreover, this system created an education gap that persists to this day. The focus on industrial values and obedience left little room for intellectual or artistic pursuits. This, combined with the systemic racism and discrimination faced by these communities, has resulted in lower educational attainment and higher dropout rates among minority students. So, when we think about the American public education system, we must remember that its history is not just a story of progress and enlightenment. It's also a tale of cultural erasure and forced assimilation. The system was not just about education, but also about the forced assimilation of minority communities. Did you know that the education system had a big part to play in the economy? This may come as a surprise to many, but the history of American public education was significantly influenced by the industrial needs of the time. The system was designed not so much to cultivate free thinkers or inspire innovators, but to churn out a workforce suitable for factories and industries. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a time of rapid industrialization. The economy needed a steady supply of workers who were not only literate but also disciplined and obedient. The education system of the time was restructured to meet this demand. It was shaped to instill in students the values of punctuality, obedience, and conformity, qualities that were deemed essential for a factory worker. Industrialists played a significant role in this transformation. Figures like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller saw the potential in an education system that could mold the young minds into a compliant workforce. They influenced the curriculum and the structure of the schools to ensure that the system churned out the type of workers they needed. Rockefeller's General Education Board was a prime example of this. Its aim was to shape individuals who were docile and compliant, ready to fit into the industrial machine without causing much trouble. The system was not designed to encourage creativity or independent thinking. It did not aim to produce artists, writers, or intellectuals. Rather, it was focused on creating a workforce that could meet the economic needs of the time. The curriculum was designed to instill Protestant values, nationalism, and obedience to authority, rather than encourage critical thinking or intellectual exploration. This focus on economic needs had far-reaching implications. It meant that generations of minds were shaped not to reach their full intellectual potential, but to become cogs in the industrial machine. The most profitable parts of these minds were extracted, used to drive the economy, while their creative and intellectual potentials were often left untapped. The goal was not intellectual growth, but economic gain. This simple statement captures the essence of the historical American education system. As we reflect on this history, it's worth asking, how much of this legacy continues to shape our education system today? And what can we do to ensure that our schools do more than just prepare students for the workforce, but also help them reach their full intellectual and creative potential? So, what do you think about the origins and goals of the American public education system? We've journeyed through the inception of the American public school system in the 19th century, a time when the objective was not so much to enlighten, but to standardize and control. We've seen the influence of Horace Mann, the first Massachusetts Secretary of Education, who looked to the Prussian education system as a model, a system that was more concerned with subduing populations than nurturing individual growth. We delved into the role of industrialists like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller, who played a significant part in molding the education system to cater to the economic needs of factories and industries. They were instrumental in creating an education system that prioritized producing workers for factories and managers for industrial operations. The General Education Board, created by Rockefeller himself, aimed to shape people into obedient and compliant individuals. We explored the tragic impact this system had on minority communities, especially Native American children who were forcibly separated from their families and tribes to be assimilated into mainstream society. The goal was not to raise intellectuals or artists, but to instill Protestant values, nationalism, and obedience to authority. In essence, the American public education system was designed to extract the most profitable parts of generations of minds. But what do you make of this? How does this history sit with you? Does it raise questions about the current state of education? Does it challenge our notions of what education should be about? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to tell me which topic you'd like me to explore next. Press the like button and subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss any new videos. Let there be freedom. Have a great day.